Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Round Robin. I am your host, Tracy Preston, along with Christine Mulligan, Nina Mulligan, Regina Lindsay, and of course, my husband, Todd Preston. Hey, everyone.
Hello. Hello. Hi.
Hey, everyone.
So, on today's episode, we are going to be talking about another series on Netflix. Why? Because I'm addicted and I love Netflix. So on Monday's show on Malice, we talked about Sister Yanina. She was a young, vivacious nun that disappeared and was murdered and, had an affair with the priest in a Catholic church. And we have just watched a show on Netflix called The Keepers, and this is another nun story. So just kind of thought it was a perfect segue. And this is even deeper and darker. So a brief summary. So this series, The Keepers, came out in 2017, but I just saw it and asked everyone to watch it. So the show is based on a nun named Sister Catherine Sesnick. And this all took place in Baltimore. And the year was 1969. So just about something that I learned about Baltimore because I just didn't know. But Baltimore was a city of firsts, right? The first telegraph, the first lit street lights.
Wow.
Trains, of course. And it is the first place of the Catholic diocese, the very first place. And that was in Baltimore. And so Catholicism was huge. If you weren't going to church, well, you just didn't fit in, right? So everyone was going to the Catholic church. There was Catholic churches everywhere. And for young girls, going to, Catholic school was a big thing. And to get into the high school was actually an even huger deal because you had to test in. It's like no joke. You just don't go to school. And that school is called the Archbishop Keough High School. So it was an honor and a privilege to get in. And boy, oh boy, were your parents ever proud of you. State of the art, everything. It was a brand new school. And, there were some older nuns that were, of course, teaching in the school, some pretty old nuns. And then you had a group of young nuns, a set of 20-something nuns. And one of those nuns was Sister Catherine Sesnick. She was 25. She was vivacious and fun. She played the guitar. And the girls that took her classes all felt like they could relate to her, which makes sense, someone a little more closer to your age, someone who's a little more fun, someone who's not so scary as some of those old nuns in the school. But here's the thing. The school had a very, very, very dark secret, and that secret is because of a Father Maskell. Father Maskell was also the counselor, and he was up to some horrible, horrible, horrible behaviors towards these young girls. Being in Catholic school, confessional is a big deal. Well, some of these young girls that went into the confessional, of course, now I'm not Catholic. I mean, my mother was, but I was not raised to be a Catholic. But I do understand going into the confessional and you confess your sins to the Father and whatever they tell you, right? Do so many Hail Marys and whatever else. So a few of these girls that had gone in had confessed to being sexually molested. In fact, one of the girls who turns in to be a pretty heavy player in this story was sexually molested by her pedophile uncle. And so that came out in confession. And there were other girls who had very similar stories. And so while they would be in class, overhead on the loudspeaker,
send so-and-so to my office.
And they did. And the things that happened in that office were horrific. Sexual deeds on these girls, by Father Maskell. And not only were they performed by him, he would also invite buddies, like, other fathers in the church, police officers, and just other men. So not only were these girls being violated by someone that they looked up to, someone that they held in a very high regard, then they were also being raped and horribly molested by police officers. And the one girl, her father was also a police officer. So listening to this again tonight, and I'm thinking, oh my God, how horrible. My father was a police officer. I had great respect for him. I loved seeing him in his uniform. And now this 14-year-old girl is being raped by police officers. And this went on for years. And it wasn't just a handful of girls. It was up to at least, well, they say anywhere from 30 to 100. And all of this came out because two girls that were students of Sister Sesnick, she disappeared because what happened was she was watching all of this, listening to the overhead pages, looking at the faces of these girls when they heard their name, and then they would be gone for God knows how long. And it wasn't just one girl that Sister Sesnick was watching it on. And one day she had asked the one girl, well, how do you feel about school here? And she's like, well, I don't really like it. And so Sister Sesnick was trying to get her to open about it. And she's like, well, how about you just nod your head yes or no? So basically what it came down to is she was figuring out that things were being done to these girls that they didn't want done to them. And basically she was on to it, and at one point had even said to the father, as this one particular girl was going in his office, oh, I wasn't aware she needed this therapy or this treatment. And he's like, well, yeah, it's working out great. And in the door, he went and shut the door. So the belief is that Sister Sesnick was going to make it known that she knows about what is going on. And lo and behold, she disappears and is not found for a couple months later when they found her body dumped near a field. So the two girls that were seniors at the time this happened, they're the ones all these years later being private detectives to try to solve the murder of Sister Sesnick. But in turn, all the rape and molestation that was going on is pretty much what they uncovered, and the cover-up that the church was doing, right? So like we talked about with Sister Yanina, they moved the father around. Okay, we got some bad business here. We're going to move you over there. Uh-oh, it's happening again there? Now we're going to move you over this way. So on and so forth. And that's basically what they did with this guy. So I don't know about you guys, but I was hot mad when I was watching this episode.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's just like all the other sex crime rings. They just shuffle the evildoers around, and then when they're about to get exposed, they off people and then just shuffle them around again. But in this case, they were ultimately exposed. Obviously, we're talking about them, and we know the story. But unfortunately, that poor nun had to lose her life for it.
Yeah, and all the twists and turns that came up about it. For example, the night that Sister Sesnick went missing, her sister was getting married, and I think it was a Friday, right? School's out, cashed her check, kind of ran some errands, bought some buns. She was going to be bringing in buns to school for the other nuns. And it was about 7 o'clock at night, and she had gone to a jeweler because she had had a very special necklace made for her sister. And it was like a little wedding bell, and it looked like a peridot. Peridot gem inside. And, because her sister, they're all relating it to August. Well, Sister Sesnick is living in an apartment with another sister, Sister Russell. But about a block away, if that, kind of cutting through the grass, There was a student that, kind of had a crush on a father, a pastor teacher at the school, and they had just gotten like their yearbook. So they're like, oh my God, let's go see where Father so and so lives. So as they were standing outside of this guy's house, watching him get, look at himself in the mirror and whatnot, they claimed that they heard a man's voice shouting, and to them it sounded like something very violent was going on. Well, and I find it very creepy to think that they probably heard the man who was taking Sister Sesnick.
Yeah.
Because I don't believe that Father Mescal had his hands like completely in it. I think he organized it, because this doesn't seem like the kind of guy who would, kind of get someone out of the way, have someone else do it for him. Because, right, he was also the counselor for the police. Not just one police station or one department, multiple departments. Plus, this guy's brother was a cop for the Baltimore police, So it was like favor after favor. Oh, and he was also the counselor for the Coast Guard and maybe some other branches.
I think the firefighters as well there.
Yep. So I'm trying to remember the guy's name. So there was another lady who was involved with a man. And he was kind of like a rough and tough kind of a guy. And one day he comes home and gives his wife a necklace.
Oh, yeah.
Remember that?
Yeah.
Well, the necklace, the girl was kind of surprised because it was like her birthday or something like that. And she's like, I would have thought it would have been my birthstone or something that made sense. And when she looked at the necklace, it was the wedding bell with the peridot.
Well, not only that, but he walked through the door with spatters of blood on his shirt.
Right. She's like, where you been? He's like, got in a fight. And, they interviewed this guy. He's an elderly man. And he still would not give it up.
Yeah, yeah.
He looked guilty as guilty could be.
Yeah, his body language was saying all we needed to hear.
Yeah.
He kept covering his mouth, as if to stop himself from saying anything.
Yeah, don't let the words out that you did it. You went this far in life.
Yeah.
Keeping a secret. Well, who knows? I'm sure the threat of, hey, don't you say a word because we'll kill you, right? Because he's so connected with the police and all that. I just found it very interesting.
Unfortunately, this is just another ring. And unfortunately, it's usually a constituent of established older males that lean on each other and blackmail each other to all stay in step. And it's disgusting. And it's not even surprising anymore. How gross is that? That it's not even surprising. But let alone that it was through the Catholic Church, who has a long-standing history of shuffle and escape any damages and keeping everything very secretive. But any organized religion or deeply steeped organization, that's prime for evil deeds like this to happen. Because, I don't know, it's all a matter of control to begin with. The organization itself is controlling. So that leads to young people being easy prey because their parents are controlled and they're repeatedly told that they need to stay controlled. It's crazy to me, but it's not even shocking anymore, which is also disgusting. To say that out loud, that sex rings and misdeeds and evil doings like this, we hear about them so frequently now that it's just absurdly disgusting. That we're still, to this day, not really doing much, but talking about it.
Right. Well, the one girl, and this is what is just so heartbreaking, is that, right, they hold these fathers up to this level, and this is what's crazy, is the one lady, and I'm not going to bring up her name. If you guys want to watch it, you can see it. But she's the one who held the key, really, that busted this wide open, when the two girls were doing the investigation to help solve this woman's murder. And when she was in the confessional, and it came out later, like when she was saying all these things that her uncle had done to her, the father said, "Can I hold on a minute? Can I look at you?" which I don't think they're supposed to do that. Christine, you would know better than I, right? They're not supposed to look at you when you're in the confessional.
Well, there's like a screen. I mean, I was raised Catholic. My parents are very Catholic. I so much don't conform to any organized religion, but I did go to CCD, which is catechism school. I went once a week. I didn't go to parochial school. I went to public school. But during CCD, one of the ceremonialist things that we do is confession. So I have done confession. Mind you, I loved to bend rules as far as I could before they broke. So, of course, it was a game to me. I didn't take it very seriously, whatever that means for my eternal soul, whatever. But there's like a screen in between. It's like if you picture two telephone booths next to each other and they're dark when you go in there, there's a curtain that covers a screen. When the confession starts, the curtain is pulled back and you can see through the screen, but you really can only see like a silhouette, so to speak. But I do believe there are confessional booths that you can pull back that screen. So,
sorry, I converted as an adult when I married my first husband to Catholicism. I went to RCIA, which is the Rite of Christian Initiation for Adults, which is the Catholic version of like adult catechism, right? If you were raised in another religion and you're converting to Catholicism, this is where you go to kind of learn what it's about. And as part of that, we did participate in confession, and those were actually face-to-face, almost like a therapy session where you're confessing your sins to another person. Being raised Protestant, it was really kind of difficult for me to wrap my head around the concept of confessing my sins to someone other than God. Okay, to be fair. But it was a face-to-face thing in some situations, but I know that the original, like the old way it was, you see it in movies. People go in and they sit down in the little booth, and it's like a phone booth, and the father pulls back the divider that's between them, and it reminds me of the mesh that was over old stereo speakers where you can kind of see that somebody's there, but you can't see who.
Right.
The idea was that it was supposed to be anonymous to some degree.
So this guy, can I look at you? Well, it comes out in the end that he started spanking his wank, looking at this little girl, and basically said, well, we're going to have to pray really hard about this. I'm not sure God can forgive you. So that was the manipulation that started taking place. And then every time she went to this guy's office, the sexual things were happening. They would call her a whore. We're going to keep praying for you, so on and so forth. And the things they did were just horrible and just awful for this girl. And this is the interesting thing. So she would disassociate it, right? So she did these things because all she ever wanted to do was be forgiven for what had happened, because they made her feel that it's your fault that your uncle molested you. You made this happen. And so that's why she kept going. And then she just suppressed and suppressed and suppressed and suppressed. And she said, as soon as I walked out of that door, I heard the click. And then it was just like she just went into a different world. And it was years and years. I mean, these women are, what, in their 60s now?
70s.
When they were going to court and all that, I don't think they were in their... I think they're in there. They graduated in like 70, 72, and 71.
Yeah.
Right? So this is in 2017. All that's happening. And so this is the thing that just really made me upset was, they had built this case, and it was like the first case on repressed memories.
Yeah.
Right? And so there's a statute of limitation on rape. But since this was the first case of repressed memory, they had to take it in front of the judge and the attorneys. And these women were just horribly questioned. And of course, these attorneys are working for the
church,
diocese. Yep. So it was just brutal. And of course, finally they tossed it out. They're like, nope, can't have it. We're not having this. These are repressed memories and so on and so forth. You're basically screwed. And so this Father Maskell, the thing that just made me insane was, right, they moved him around, and then hid him. Hid him here, hid him there. We're hiding him in like a psych hospital or some shit. And actually one of the girls was in the hospital, and she remembered, she was like, oh, Father Maskell's here? Huh. Can I go see? She made up this story that, she was looking for her father.
Right.
So she wasn't really lying all that much, but looking for her father, and could she go see maybe this is him? And at this point, I don't know if he had a stroke.
He wasn't healthy. He
wasn't good. He kind of had that far away look.
Yeah.
And she was like, I got right in his face and said a few things, and she's like, he wasn't there. So, I mean, sadly, this guy just never really was forced to deal with what he did. And the other thing is, too, is this guy even carried a gun, even pulled it out. And, a couple of these altar boys, they would go in early, and this guy would pull out a gun. And the little boy, who actually ended up being a police officer, he had questioned Father Maskell. He's like, why do you have a gun? And he had said that the look that he gave, Father Maskell gave this boy, and basically was like, don't you ever question me again, so on and so forth. It was such a frightening look from Father Maskell that he said he never saw that look again until he was a police officer dealing with murderers.
Yeah. Yeah, what's a priest got to be packing for?
Right. Why you got that in church? And in your office?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Or intimidation, of course.
Right.
I didn't want to interrupt, but also when Regina was talking and she said, when you go into catechism and they're teaching you about all the things, I couldn't help myself, but, and also Nina, we were mumbling about it. You mean they were indoctrinating you? The indoctrination of it all is hysterical. Even the gun is indoctrinating the fear in them.
Absolutely. And, it's a whole different thing. So there is a reason not to condemn any type of religion or whatever, but there's a reason that they have Sunday school, right? Because children's brains are more malleable. And going to that as an adult is a lot different experience than it was going to Sunday school as a child, right? They're telling you these stories and you're reading the Bible. You don't question the authority of this person. And the way that the Catholic Church operates is that a priest is sort of God's messenger on earth, and you're taught not to really question what they say or what they tell you to do. They always quoted this Bible verse that is, those who sin, they're forgiven. So it was almost like you needed this person's approval to be forgiven by Jesus, which in the Protestant church is not a thing. But let's be honest, churches and organized religion of any kind has traditionally been a place for pedophiles to hide. Where else can a grown-ass man go that he has unfettered access to children whose parents trust him implicitly with the care, both physically and spiritually, of their child? And while there are some very, very good people in the priesthood and in youth ministry, all over the world, there are some very, very bad people. And they go there because, let's face it, most pedophiles look like very upstanding, very trustworthy people. If they didn't, nobody would leave their children with them. Right? It's like you don't look at them from 500 paces and go, that guy's a friggin' pedophile. He's psycho. I wouldn't trust him with my dog, let alone my child. They don't look that way. They look trustworthy. They appear caring. They appear loving. They appear to be upstanding pillars of the community. That's where shit goes sideways, is when then your child comes home, or all of a sudden your child is very reluctant to go to church, to go to Sunday school, to go to confession, to go to whatever youth ministry meeting. And they end up, I think a lot of parents feeling like, oh, well, maybe they're just a little awkward or whatever. They want to coerce them, and then they don't realize that your child is being hurt by the people that you're entrusting to protect them.
Right.
And that's where the problem lies.
Right. And it just blows my mind that all of this happened in school during classes. And this guy probably never even locked his door. Do you know what I'm saying? Like horrible, horrible sexual acts were being performed on these girls in this guy's office right in the school.
Right.
During class days, during your normal school hours. And I just find it crazy that no one except for Sister Sesnick caught on to it.
Right.
Or did they just ignore it?
Well, a lot of them were probably afraid of this dude as well,
People you didn't question a priest. If you were raised Catholic and you're going to mass from birth, you're told basically that the priest is God's representative on earth. There's no reason for him to lock his door because nobody is going to open that door without knocking, without his consent. Point blank and period. That's how it is. The trust was absolute. And, just for example, there was abuse that wasn't sexually related. My daughter's father was raised Roman Catholic. He lived in Michigan. He was from Monroe Township, went to Monroe Catholic Central. The priests there that taught them were of the Jesuit order. And he's told me stories about, one of the brothers breaking a kid's leg because he had asked the child to go to the principal's office and the kid was being obstinate, didn't want to go to the principal's office. His brother, in the process of physically removing him from the desk, the kid looped his foot around the leg of the desk and the brother pulled on him so hard it actually broke his leg.
That's
and of course
insane.
That brother was disciplined, but this was not an uncommon occurrence. Corporal punishment by nuns, by brothers, by priests was not uncommon. And even in the secular setting in that era, it wasn't uncommon. I grew up in the 70s and 80s. They had paddle permits at my school. The parents could go down and literally sign a document that said that any teacher or member of the faculty in that school that thought that your child misbehaved could beat your ass.
That's
with
nuts.
no questions asked.
They still have that in Louisiana to this day.
Wow.
Really?
It still happens in
Still do
Texas to this day.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not that
Public
uncommon. And so that's a public school. Yes, that's a public school. Right. So even if somebody walked by and heard a kid wailing in the principal's office, they're just assuming that kid's getting their ass beat with a paddle. Just saying.
I can't believe that that's even acceptable today. I cannot believe that someone would give an administrator at a school permission to hit your child. I don't even hit my child. I don't think you can hit your kids anymore.
Oh, yeah, you can. Ma'am, I hate to break it to you, but if somebody tried to make corporal punishment illegal in Texas, people would be lined up in Austin on the Capitol steps spanking their children just because they can. I'm just saying that's just how it is. It's, and it makes no sense. I mean, when you think about it, especially as a nurse, as a practitioner, as a reasoning adult, but I grew up in the generation where somebody would hit you and be like, "Hey, we don't hit." Really?
Watch this.
It's you get in a fight with your sibling, and your parents would beat your ass and go, "Hey, we don't hit people."
Right.
Are you sure about that?
Well, just to get back to the Netflix docu-series, maybe that's what Sesnick, the nun, maybe that's what she was thinking, is that these girls were being corporally punished instead of being maliciously raped.
There was one girl, because like I said, they all said that they felt they could speak to Sister Sesnick. She was like, we'd all be sitting there doing our work. All of a sudden there's Mescal again, calling a girl down there. And she's like, and you'd have this look of like, oh my God. And then you look at your girlfriends and they're all looking at you with these sad eyes. I don't know. I think Sister Sesnick, she saw it. I'm not certain she thought these girls were being hit. I think she knew something else was going on.
Wasn't it the
I'm
Jane?
just saying, throughout her process, maybe that was her plausible deniability in her mind before she escalated it. Because as soon as she escalated it, she was gone. They murdered her.
Yeah, right quick.
Well, I think it was Jane, the lady that was going by Jane Doe for most of the series.
Mm-hmm.
She actually was one of the ones that talked to Sister Sesnick, right?
Yeah, so she was the Jane Doe. She was after one of her visits to Maskell's office. When she walked out, at this point, she was in such a daze, and she didn't know where she was because, again, she would just completely throw everything that just happened because it's trauma. She had been, molested by an uncle, so she already had that ability to kind of tuck it away. And now it's happening with, this most powerful guy in the school. And she said she didn't know what she was supposed to do. She was lost. Where am I supposed to be right now? Where am I supposed to go? Like, dazed and confused. And when Sesnick saw her, she's like, where are you supposed to be right now? She's like, I don't know. And so then she found this teacher and said, oh, Sister so-and-so, is this girl supposed to be in your class? Oh, yes. Okay, you go here now. I don't know. The whole thing is dumbfounding to me because I was not raised that way. And I've always had, and this is a strange little story, but I was in grade school and my mom always bounced in and out of religion, I think, when she needed it, which meant she felt bad about something or guilty about something. It was like, oh, we're going to church today. I'm like, what? Why are you taking me? We never go. So anyway, there was a guy who came over to our house, and I remember sitting on the couch and he was pulling out, those old, remember the old Christian books?
Yeah.
I used to love to look at them. I thought the artwork was amazing. But it was like showing us that kind of stuff. He put up a little projector screen and all that. And in grade school, I just remember thinking, this guy is trying to brainwash me. He's trying to brainwash me. I didn't like it. It didn't feel right. And not that I've always been that way. I mean, I've had negative experiences just because my mom never took me on the regular. And when we go, she'd shove me down in the school, I don't want to say, Sunday school.
Sunday school, yeah.
When you're down there with all the other kids. Now, these are kids who go all the time. Sundays, Wednesday nights, picnics with the church, and they're all playing games and they all know the Bible. I don't know the Bible. So to me, I was just like, I don't like this. This isn't I felt like, an outcast. I'm just all of a sudden here. I don't know what you guys are talking about kind of thing. So for me, it was just not a great experience. But as I was older, I needed help and went to a great church and I loved it. I got what I needed and I was healed and I was fine. I don't feel the need to have to go. So for me, it's kind of hard for me to understand how, deeply tied most people are to religion. I'm more of a spiritual person. I don't know. I have a very hard time putting that much trust into a human being who's supposed to be a representative of God.
Right.
I might sound like a straight up heathen, but
well, my mom went to Catholic school, and she was Catholic most of her life, and but none of us they didn't put religion on us kids. And every Sunday she went to church, and she'd say, "Anybody want to go with me?" And I was the only one that ever volunteered because I just wanted to hang out with my mom for one. And plus, she took me out to breakfast afterwards, and I got to order whatever I wanted.
Motivation. So,
I mean, it was cool. It was cool. Well, for me, it was more of the one-on-one with my mom. I was doing something special with my mom, and that was cool. That was cool enough for me. Mm-hmm. My mom didn't really talk a whole lot about her experiences in Catholic school, other than not huge detail, but it wasn't a fun place for her. She did mention several times that the nuns were mean, so they were probably the older nuns like we were talking about that couldn't really relate to the younger generation.
Right, the corporal punishment.
Right. Yep. She did mention that she got the ruler across her hands a couple of times and stuff like that. But
Well, I mean, let's be honest. This is not an issue with religion as much as it's an issue with people. It's an issue with individuals. Where the religion part comes in is the fact that, and it's not just the Catholic Church. I think more emphasis is placed on the Catholic Church in this situation because priests are supposed to be celibate. Okay, I think more attention is drawn to it from that perspective, but it happens in all religions. It's not Catholicism. It's not Protestantism. The issue is not with religion itself. It's with the fact that these people that have these proclivities to violence towards children, violence towards women, boys, whatever it is, they tend to gravitate towards religion because that group of people tends to be very trusted and people will leave their children with them.
Right.
Okay. When it becomes an issue for me is the fact that most churches, and I'm not talking about just the Catholic Church again, go to great lengths to protect and to cover up when these abuses happen versus focusing on helping the victims. They focus on protecting the perpetrators.
Saving face.
That's my
basically,
issue.
Yeah.
That's what I was going to say. The Catholic Church catches so much more heat when this happens in and around Catholicism because of their damning way that they never accept accountability. They shuffle these priests or nuns, whichever the case may be, because there's nuns out there that have done atrocities to children as well that we've heard of, but mostly priests. Yes, they have the added layer that they're supposed to be celibate, but then the Catholic Church as a whole, the diocese in general, they just never accept accountability. They never hold these evildoers accountable and try them or fire them or anything. They just push them around, from church to church, diocese to diocese.
Mm-hmm.
And they just
sweep it under the rug.
Yes.
And they do. They allow more children in more areas of the country to be victimized by the same people over and over and over.
Exactly.
And it's not an exclusive thing to Catholicism. It happens in pretty much any religious setting. And I mean, I've watched documentaries about ashrams where this happens, Jehovah's Witnesses churches, Baptist churches, Christian churches. It doesn't matter. My point here being that when the church identifies a perpetrator, their obligation should be to the victims to help them get the counseling that they need to be whole and to realize that none of this was their fault.
So why doesn't that happen?
Protecting themselves and protecting, I don't know. And that's the question. I mean, that's the $1 million question, right?
But also, I mean, the statistics are 1 in 4 children are abused. So, like Regina said, it happens everywhere. But this docuseries, and being that it was the Catholic Church again, the accountability, and yes, their focus should be on the victims, and it never is. And the perpetrators should be tried, and they never are. That's what makes it even more disgusting.
But even think about it. I mean, even in secular society, right? A woman says that she's raped. A boy says that he's raped. And you go to court, and what happens? The defense attorney somehow makes it your fault. This is a societal problem. It transcends religion. It transcends everything else. It's all about accountability for the perpetrator. I think probably, Nina and I have discussed, our history and the fact, I don't know, she probably will agree with me, but I'm not going to speak for her. But when you bring that to light, if you do, then somehow you did something that warranted that attack on you, even though you were a child and you had no sexual thought in your head about anything. That perpetrator is somehow going to turn it around and it was your fault. And when you go to court on something like that, whether you're raped as an adult, as a child, whatever it is, you have to prove basically that you didn't solicit that advance in some way.
And that's insane. That
It
makes
is.
me insane.
It's insane.
Guys.
Victims of sexual assault are victimized over and over, and they're victimized mostly by the court system.
Agreed. So here's a question for you guys, because I have a hard time understanding why this is. Why is it that in a Catholic church that the priests have to be celibate and the nuns have to marry God? Why is that a thing? Because, you know, I remember going to church. My pastor was married. He had lots of kids. So why is it that you have to do this in the Catholic Church?
The explanation that I was given as an adult going through the adult version of catechism is that a priest's primary obligation needs to be to his flock, to his congregation. So if you're married and you have a wife and you have children and whatever, let's say, for example, your wife is in the hospital and she's ill, but one of your congregants is also ill and in the hospital and needs pastoral care, you shouldn't have that conflict of choosing between your family and choosing between your congregants. So you are, you know, a representative of God, and your first and only obligation should be to your parish, to the people that come to that church. You should not have any conflict of interest. There should not be any competing priorities as far as wife, children, nieces, nephews, whatever it is. Your obligation is 100% to your parish.
But don't you think that this whole thing makes these people do these things? Because you're not supposed
to? Of course,
to?
it doesn't help. Because the number one reason that people leave the priesthood, statistically, is loneliness.
Yeah, it makes no
sense. People assume that you don't need companionship. And it denies human nature.
Agreed.
We need connection with one another.
Agreed. And I don't understand why nuns have to marry God to serve God. I have issues.
It's because your only focus and obligation should be to serve God and to serve the church in whatever your vocation is. And if your vocation is as a nun, then your vocation is to educate and to spread the word of God. Point blank and period. There's nothing else. You should have no personal interest in anything else.
Well, I don't like it.
It doesn't make sense to people that weren't raised in it. And I totally understand that. And again, as an adult, hearing all this, I'm like asking the same questions that you were asking. Because human beings, you know, we talked about this where addiction was concerned. We need connection with one another. We need society. We need groups of like-minded individuals where we can share our ideas and our thoughts and be who we are. Self-expression is important to people, and lack thereof leads you down a dark path.
Maybe that's why the nuns were so damn mean. Maybe that's why they were so damn mean. They were mad.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, yeah, you dedicated your life and God bless you. I mean, well, here am I saying God bless, but you know what I'm just saying? Bless your heart for doing that. And that's wonderful. But humans need love. Humans need contact. They need those
Intimacy,
things.
Community.
Yeah. I don't know. It just breaks my heart because I'm sure there is a heck of a lot of good that comes out, but there's just so much bad. It just taints it for me. And, you know, not only the molestation, but murder. Now, this is the second murder of a nun that we've talked about. Now, granted, there's a time span here, but still, how many more are out there?
Right.
I was going to say that we're aware of.
Exactly.
Well, organized religion has been murdering en masse since its inception. And there isn't anything good about organized religion. I personally believe that it's the cancer of humanity. It's based on a patriarchal system. It's been derived and interpreted by cis-het white men. And since its inception, it has done nothing but go around eradicating people that don't agree with them in order to indoctrinate them into the system of slavery. Period. The end. There's really nothing good that comes from religion, if you ask my opinion. Secondly, the Bible does say, and I believe it was Paul when he was writing to the church, said, that it is actually all humans' duty to only be dutiful to God and to remain celibate and spend your days pleasing the Lord. But if you're a heathen and you can't keep yourself from fornicating, then your recourse is marriage. Now, when I did research on church, and I had the same question about why priests couldn't marry, because it makes no sense why I would go to a marriage counselor who's never been married before. That makes no fucking sense to me, but whatever. The research that I found was that in the beginning, priests could be married. But the provision was that if the priest died before the family did, then the diocese had to continue paying for that family for the rest of their lives. And then so if you take into consideration how much money is going out to do that, it gets to be very expensive. And so they changed the rule and made it so that priests couldn't be married because they didn't want to continue paying out those death benefits. So I guess the whole taking care of widows things isn't really a good thing either. It all goes back to the money. Right. It's just 80% of violence in this world is done by men. And I'm sorry, Todd, I'm not saying all men, but I'm saying all men. Just statistically speaking, women are not the ones that are doing this shit. It's men. And all religion does is give them the opportunity to suppress everybody else but themselves for their sole purpose of power. So I really can't, I've been silent because, to be quite honest with you, it infuriates me to no end. Like, I cannot say anything nice about organized religion, except for maybe Buddhists. I think Buddhists are the only people I have never heard about going out and murdering people in order to advance their cause, you know?
And Hindus.
Right. Yeah, Hindus.
But, you know, I mean, I agree with you, Nina, that so I'm a very spiritual person, and I do believe that there's a higher power, and what you call it is immaterial. But organized religion, in most cases, is a method for control. It's man-made. It's a method for control, most often a method for controlling women, to be fair. And because it tells us what we can and we can't do and who we need to obey. But the other thing that when you really get down to brass tacks and you think about it, in the history of the world, more people have been murdered in the name of God than for any other reason.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
So what good comes from that? What good comes from that? I don't understand. None. Like, as far as I'm concerned, Rome itself, should be the wealthiest, most prosperous, most happiest place on the planet. There should be no starving. Like, anybody who lives around that area, you know, should be super set. And yet that doesn't occur. So who are they feeding? Who are they taking care of? I know that there is a guy that's in charge of all that stuff who takes a vow of poverty but dresses himself in gold every day and sits on a golden throne and pays for nothing and sits in a huge ass house with private security that rivals that of nations.
The Secret Service.
I mean, it's insane. It's completely insane to me. And I am more mad at myself for having ever fallen for that bullshit. I hate myself every day for living that life, living that lie, and being, because I joined that when I was 26. So it's I don't even have the benefit of saying, oh, well, I didn't know any better because that's how I grew up. I didn't grow up that way. Of course, once I came out, my mom all of a sudden found religion, and she was like, how are you going to reconcile that with God? And I'm like, well, that's hilarious. This is the woman who spent my entire childhood keeping me out of church because churches were evil, right? So I don't know. I've just never heard anything really good as far as history is concerned when it comes to organized religion. So it doesn't surprise me, and it's sickening, and I don't think that there's a higher power. I believe that we are the higher power. Each of us individually, our souls collectively, are the higher power. And we have been spellbound to believe that that is not the case. And because we've been duped, we are where we are. And we keep repeating history on this fucking ridiculous loop. because we keep going to this book that was written 3,000 years ago by people who were illiterate and didn't know what the fuck they were talking about. Like, it just sends me. So I don't, I'm just going to be quiet now because I hate it. I hate it so much.
Yeah, the rest of us are tippy-toeing around not bashing religion too much. And then here's my wife.
Hey, you know what?
Screw it all. I can't.
Yep.
I can't because it's cost me the relationship with my child, you know?
Yeah.
So that's very hard for me because I lost what came from my womb because of the church.
And you know what, Nina? I'm proud of you for being able to speak up and say what you feel about it. It's not an easy thing to do.
I've lived both sides of this coin now, having been a very conservative, evangelical Assemblies of God, Christian Southern woman, right? And now I've done a complete 180, and I'm probably more liberal than most people who have been liberal their whole lives. And I think that's because I've lived the lie. I've come out of the lie. So it's like super infuriating to me to see people still stuck in that abomination of what they want to call love. Because it's not love. There's nothing loving about Christianity.
It's power and control.
I can't get behind it.
Yeah, I feel the same way. And again, to those who are in it, that's good. That's, to each their own. But organized religion is not for me. There was a time in my life I needed something and it did something for me. And then once I got through that deep, dark place I was in, I had no desire to go back.
Well,
Yeah.
And that's how you know that you're in a cult. Because nobody joins a cult when they're happy. They only join the cult at their lowest point in life, when they're looking for something to help them out of the hole that they believe that they're in. I've never heard a coming to Jesus story that wasn't due to some kind of horrific trauma that led that person to want to seek that out. Because at that point, you're so desperate for answers that you'll believe anything. And that is why it's so dangerous.
Grasping at straws to make sense of your life.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Well said.
Well, even, we look at ancient cultures and we kind of laugh at the Greeks and the Romans with their multiple gods and this and that. And it's always a way for humans to rationalize and explain the inexplicable, right? The horrible things that happen to us as people, as humans. I struggle with this a little bit because, I am a scientist, but I also I'm more of an agnostic, I guess, than an atheist, because I'm not 100% ready to deny that there's a higher power, but I would like some empirical evidence to that effect. But by the same token, what I do know is that people gathered around this very structured set of beliefs to the exclusion of other people, to the indifference to the plight of other people is not constructive, and it's not healthy for anyone. And that's my issue, is that I do believe that I do believe that there is some kind of a higher power. I don't believe that he exists in the way that a lot of people think that he exists, because I'm just going to put this out there. If there is a God that is okay, that knows, if they're omniscient, that knows that someone's going to go in and shoot up an elementary school and allows that to happen, but then also helps somebody else win a gold medal at the Olympics, well, then fuck him. Okay? Because that is not a loving God. I struggle with that every day. But I had a very dear friend that was an atheist who's not with us anymore. And one of the things that he told me, one of the first conversations that we had, is that he was somewhat envious of people who were religious, whether it was Christian or Hindu, Buddhist, whatever it was, because we believe that when someone that we love passes on, that they go someplace better. And he said, I know better. They just cease to exist. And that's a really kind of dark hole to climb into, right? You mourn even more the loss of that person because they're just not there anymore. And I think that he had a valid point, that a lot of us that are struggling to let go of faith and religion, it's because you need to believe that the people that you lose go somewhere better than this.
Here's my thought on what happens after someone dies. And you guys might all think I'm crazy as shit, but this is where my brain goes. yeah, you cease to exist here. But I mean, the life force within our bodies is something that you can't explain, right? A sperm and an egg, they do their thing and multiply, 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 and they create this life, right? Like in a petri dish, but it's in your womb. But there's a magical life force that gives us our soul. And to me, when we die, that energy that we possess, to me, I feel like that is released. And that soul, that light, that energy goes and does and helps, whatever it may be. Maybe it's a collectiveness of all the souls in different levels. I mean, I've had patients who have died multiple times, have come back to the unit to thank us for caring for them. Of course, you don't recognize them when they first come in because they look normal, but I've had them tell me stories of things they've seen, things I've read about, because when my dad died, I was lost. Like, how is this possible? This is like a magic trick. Poof, he's just gone. I've had my own experiences since my dad's death. I've had dreams of things I've never thought were possible. So to me, I just feel like that energy is released and collectively it's with all the other energies, and maybe that's God. Maybe it's all the past lives that are connected to your family, or they have jobs to do, whatever those jobs are. Does that sound crazy?
Wow. Not too crazy to me, because I kind of believe in the same thing. Like, to give an example or a metaphor for what I kind of believe. I think that the Bible is a book of fables. They tell us stories to teach us morals, to teach us lessons.
Exactly.
And somewhere in the Bible, it says that you are Christ-like, and Christ wanted us to be his mirror image and all of that. The thing is in that fable, we're all Christ. We're all, if God is a big woven blanket, every soul is a thread that makes up the fabric of that blanket. And they come to this plane, to this earth, in this lifetime that we know as life and earth and all of that, whatever you want to say. And we're here to learn how to feel. We're here to learn lessons, to learn all the feelings, to learn the good, the bad, the ugly, the indifferent. And then we go back to our collective. We go back to being a part of the blanket. We're all threads within that blanket. The souls. We're all one collective soul. We come down here, we're separate. We go back up there, we're together again. We're all kooky, Trace.
We're all kooky looky, and I love it. And you know what? It's these conversations that help us think. And I think the great thing about everyone on this call is this is a safe place, right? It doesn't matter what your feelings are, say them. Because guess what? Other people are feeling those same things. And it's okay for people to hear that we don't like this, or we don't like this, or hey, maybe we believe in this, or I believe in, whatever. It's conversation, hearing ourselves talk to one another, helping our brains to see things in a different light. And I love that. That's what I love about the round robins with my friends.
Yeah. And I mean, I agree with Christine. Even as scientists, when you think about it, physics, energy does not cease to exist. It changes forms.
Yep.
Right. So once we're done in this corporal body, the energy that we possess is released. It changes forms. It doesn't just disappear.
I agree. I think that's my takeaway.
Don't get indoctrinated. Critically think for yourself. Feel the feels. Love the love. Learn the things. And keep growing.
And be kind to one another,
Yeah. Read. Read for yourself. Do not allow someone else to read for you. You are capable of reading. Do it.
Yep. And have your own thoughts and opinions after you read it.
Right. Take what you need. But realize that not everything is meant to be taken at face value.
Well, I think on that note, we should end this story.
Let's leave with compassion for these women that really didn't get any justice here with the church and all of that. But it was eye-opening, probably for a lot of people that watch that docuseries, of the atrocities that can happen when you leave blind faith in someone that didn't deserve it.
Yep.
I think that so last year, I do think that the Catholic Church finally paid out a settlement to all their victims. And I think it was like $1.9 billion or some shit like that to go to all the victims that have ever been victimized by, they finally did it. I think it was just last year. So they paid some restitution, but I mean, okay, that doesn't make up for it, but perhaps it's a right step in the right direction,
I guess. But unfortunately,
it's acknowledgement that it occurred.
the human species has not yet learned that money isn't everything.
True.
And I agree with you, Christine. Thanks for circling us back to the root of the theme of this podcast today, is that the bravery that these women had to finally say the horrible things that happened to them, I can't even imagine how ungodly painful that was, and the ridicule that these women went through and the bullshit that they had to deal with from these attorneys. It just makes me angry. And so I am extremely proud of those women.
It's a cautionary tale. It's a cautionary tale to parents to never put blind faith into somebody because of their position. I don't care whether it's the principal of the school, the neighbor, the priest, whoever it is. If your child suddenly has a reluctance to be around them, listen to your kid.
Yep, pay attention. All right, everyone. Well, thank you as always. We appreciate you coming back and listening. Have a great week, and we will see you guys back on F-Bomb Friday. Have a great week, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Adios.
Bye.